Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Inna atayna kal kausar fasalli li rabbika banhar inna shani'aka huwal abtar. I am Shahid Najam, Vice Chairman of the Shahid Javed Berki Institute of Public Policy at NetSol. And I, with great pleasure, welcome all the participants to this webinar, Post-US Withdrawal, Afghanistan, Security, Political, and Socio-Economic Implications. This webinar is a part of our effort to bring to fore and promote discussion, debate, discourse on issues of vital significance to the country, to Pakistan. And at this juncture, we believe that Afghan issue is the most critical one, for it has repercussions and for on it hinges the entire destiny of the region if is not resolved properly. Very briefly, years of prolonged brutal war unleashed by US has left a very fragile, feeble, and embattled Afghanistan. An Afghanistan which is confronted with enormity of challenges. These challenges internally are violence and conflict, governance dysfunction, and a huge development and freedom deficit. Externally, I think the region is less secure and more vulnerable to terrorist attacks and for Afghanistan becoming a den for the proxy war. Afghanistan is indeed at a crossroad. There are many challenges which need to be addressed with Godspeed. There are big questions. So, question is, has Afghanistan learned from the lessons of the past? Will Afghanistan be able to establish inclusive, accountable government? Will the citizens of Afghanistan, especially the women and the minorities, have the constitutional rights to be able to exercise and expand their choices and express their collective voice? And then very importantly, will it allow its soil to be used by the terrorists and by those who want to introduce fanatic regimes, fascist regimes in the area? Will it allow those forces to launch operations from its soil? And at the same time, because of its geopolitical situation and geostrategic location, what are the possibilities of it becoming a den for the proxy wars? There are many issues apart from the questions that I have raised. We have, fortunately, with us very distinguished experts and panelists. They comprise Ambassador Syed Abrar Hussain, Vice Chairman of the Institute of Peace Studies, Islamabad, and a former ambassador of Pakistan to Afghanistan. We have amongst us Lieutenant General retired Ghulam Mustafa, a highly respected and a very well-known defense and geopolitics analyst, credited with raising the Army Strategic Forces Command. We have Dr. Naveed Elahi, who is adjunct professor at the School of Governance and Society, University of Management and Technology, who has authored quite a few books on terrorism and security-related issues. We also have amongst us Professor Dr. Syed Hussain Shahid Sohrawardi. If he has not joined, hopefully he will join us in due course. With these a few words, may I start with Dr. Abrar Hussain and request him to enlighten us with his thoughts on this subject. I would request that because of the paucity of the time, I know you have a very rich, profound treasure of knowledge with you, which you would like to share. But if you could confine your interventions from say 12 to 15 minutes so that we have sufficiently adequate time for interaction and for the questions and answer session. Over to you, Syed Abrar Hussain Saab.
Your mic is mute, Abrar sir.
Yes. Thank you, Shahid Najam Sahab. We are talking about a post-withdrawal Afghanistan and its security, political, and socio-economic implications. Well, the sudden collapse of Kabul has led to various uncertainties. For example, when a new government is going to be formed, will it be an inclusive government or an exclusive government of Taliban? Will it be able to bring peace and stability, the long-awaited dream of the Afghans? Will it be recognized by the international community? We know international community has been asking the Taliban to be part of an inclusive government, to not to capture Kabul by force. They have been asking them to have a negotiated settlement as a precondition for recognition of the new government. And then the question is that how they are going to handle the economic problems, the financial challenges that they are going to face. We have been hearing about so many reports that the US has blocked their $9 billion plus reserves, and they must be facing financial issues. They won't be having any money to pay the salaries. And then they are going to have this humanitarian crisis, shortage of food, shortage of medicine. And the UN and so many other countries are now trying to address those problems. So all these questions are there, and they are creating a sort of uncertainty. But before going into all these issues, let's briefly see the immediate reasons that led to this situation. The fall of Kabul was expected, but not in the way it happened. It was so sudden. Some people are now asking if withdrawing US troops was the right call. In fact, there was no other choice. After a loss of trillions of dollars and thousands of lives, the US had to withdraw its troops. It was unwise on the part of the Afghan government to think that the US troops would be there to support them indefinitely. In fact, after the Doha Agreement of 29th February 2020, the Ghani government could not see the writing on the wall. It had about 18 months to negotiate a peaceful settlement through an intra-Afghan dialogue with the Taliban. Unfortunately, it wasted a year and a half, arrogantly claiming to eliminate Taliban within 6 months. It became clear within a few weeks that Ashraf Ghani's decision to test the Taliban power on the battlefield was right now one of the reasons for delay in forming the government is this premature sudden fall of Kabul. Even the Taliban thought it would be around September, and hence they were not mentally prepared. Now it's a test of their political wisdom. Their future, to a large extent, depends on how they resolve the issue of a broad-based government. If they succeed in it, they can form the new government sooner than later and move on to address the security and economic challenges. But yet another political issue for the Taliban government will be to get recognition from the world. This, apart from forming an inclusive government, also depends on their attitude. People normally ask if the Taliban have changed. Well, it's true that the Taliban have softened their rhetoric on some issues, and there seems to be an evidence of real policy change in certain areas. They have allowed women to get education, work, and take part in politics. They have permitted TV channels to continue to work. They have promised to respect human rights, women's rights, and so on. And they are negotiating for an inclusive government. So there is a sea change in their approach. However, we have to wait and see if this transformation in Taliban is ideological or tactical. Let's hope it's not only for optics. Now, there is yet another question, that how the situation in Afghanistan is going to affect Indian negative role against Pakistan through Afghan soil. Well, with the Taliban coming to power, most of the raw agents have fled to India, and as of now, they are unable to use the Afghan soil for anti-Pakistan moves. So efforts to destabilize Pakistan through terrorist activities via Afghanistan will hopefully come to an end. Pakistan relations as well. Moreover, in the absence of Indian advisors in the new Afghan government, it is expected that Kabul will now cooperate with Pakistan and respond positively to our friendly gestures. Well, let me hurriedly address one more issue, which is about Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. There's always a question that what's the difference between the two, and why TTP will not join the ranks of Tehreek-e-Taliban Afghanistan. Well, primarily there is a difference of political ambitions between the two. Tehreek-e-Taliban Afghanistan's agenda was restricted to Afghanistan. They want to establish an Islamic government in their own country. They had support of their countrymen as well as sympathies of most of the regional countries except India when they were fighting with foreign troops. On the other hand, TTP tries to destabilize Pakistani areas with the help of anti-Pakistan elements, RAW and NDS. Some people in Pakistan fear that TTP and TTI are ideologically the same, and the former may join the latter. If it happens, I will say it will mean dismantling of TTP and not change in political agenda of Afghan Taliban. Meanwhile, Afghan Taliban have already asked TTP to stop its activities against Pakistan. Now, yet another question is that how Pakistan should react to all this situation. Well, it's obvious that Pakistan will safeguard its own interests before doing anything for the US or for Taliban or for anyone else. Facilitating peace and stability in Afghanistan is in our own interest. A peaceful Afghanistan directly and indirectly helps us in so many ways. It means less security concerns, more bilateral and regional trade, easy access to Central Asia, completion of regional economic projects, and so on. Secondly, we need to have friendly relations with the Kabul government. Thirdly, we should take other neighbors of Afghanistan, such as China, Iran, Central Asian republics, into confidence about our Afghan policy and try to address their concerns, if any. And then we should continue to help Afghan people through economic assistance in the form of projects in various sectors, scholarships to Afghan students, training to their professionals, and immediately extending humanitarian aid to them whenever and if they require it. Well, I think I'll stop here and discuss the remaining issues in the question answer session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibrar Hussain Saab. Now, may I request General Saab to please say a few words and make his presentation.
Your mic is mute. Your mic is mute.
Am I now audible, Ji? Hello?
Gigi, perfect. Now we can hear you.
Ji, Bismillah ar-Rahman Rahim. Thank you very much, Shahid Najam Saab. Ambassador Brar has been more than, I think, eloquent in telling us how and what is likely to come about in this region that's called Afghanistan, Pakistan. My own views, I hope I'm wrong and I'm not very learned man, but these are the views formed over the years as a student of what they call geography and bit of history. The first question which comes to mind is, has US really left this region? You stopped slaving Afghanistan. Does it mean that US-led Western world has abandoned this region? Because when you look at Afghanistan on the world map, it is something very fascinating that comes about. One is that the countries around it, two, as a region, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and look at it as one geographical region. Anyone who controls this, or anyone who has this region siding with it, a part of it, alliances or whatever you may call it, gets to connect to very important regions in the world, which have traditionally been the battlegrounds for control over the world in one form or the other. Eurasian landmass in its north, comprising mostly Central Asian republics, bit of Europe, and the Indian Ocean. Anyone who does that, or controls it, or denies it, is what going to form the new strategic landscape in the world. My own view is that US troops might be out of Afghanistan, leaving Afghanistan soon. US is not out. Taliban may have entered Kabul, and they've done that through their negotiated settlement with all the local warlords, tribes, and elders who were able to join them. and the political opponents of Kabul regime as it existed prior to 15 August. According to their own spokesperson and their own various statements, they were not ready to enter Kabul. And that is what I've been saying, that they may lay kind of a siege to Kabul, but not enter Kabul, because entering Kabul, taking control without having formed a loose kind of a government, inclusive, which looks inclusive and sounds inclusive, would be detrimental to their interests. When he found that there was a vacuum in Kabul, then actually was sucked in, and that is what is causing the whole issue. That also leads me to think that, was it actually planned affair to create this issue for Taliban to start with? And this is an issue that they're dealing with. Almost, while there may be 70 to 80% Afghanistan under their control, there are areas which are not under their control as yet. For example, Panjshir Valley, what will happen to that? This time around, Taliban had been very wise in their approach. They actually went to north and northeast first, because that is where from they had been beaten last time. And they're talking to the people, and mostly they were able to control Badakhshan, and they already have a governor there. And Badakhshan was usually the place from where reversal for Taliban regime started last time. Taliban, realizing that this could happen yet again, because to the north we have Turkmenistan and a bit of interest of Turkey here because of Turkoman area, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Then further north we get to reach Russia beside other few states. And Iran, of course, has its own interest. And the northeast, Wuhan border leading to China. Luckily, the Chinese were the people who understood that the challenges likely to emerge as soon as Taliban take control. And they're the ones who, I think, behind the scene have been leading a lot of efforts, supported by Putin. Taliban have done the second more important thing that Taliban have done. They've realized, and I've talked to some old friends in the game, that the monopolizing power was their biggest mistake last time around. If they hadn't done that, probably things would have been different. So they're trying to include people. And third, very important statement by President Putin. He said that we understand Afghanistan, and they should, because they have been in this region for long enough to understand one simple fact, that Afghans have a way of life. They have a psyche. They have a way they work things. Trying to change that, trying to change the socio-cultural landscape of the country, and bringing in a new system which is alien to the people, unless the people are ready, that is not possible. They tried it for many years, and ultimately they were beaten out of Afghanistan. The Americans tried it for 20 years, and they thought they have sort of a system. But the moment the forces left, that system collapsed. This is a very big mistake that the international community is forcing on Taliban. Instead of letting them be and letting them work the system, bring about what is going to actually help them settle down, we are forcing Afghans and Talibans to go against what is their basic nature. Afghanistan was never a centrally controlled, governed country the way we think Pakistan is or other countries are. It always was a different way of working. There are locals, tribes, local elders, the Jirgas, and I mean, that's not time enough to talk about that. But the fact is that Taliban or anybody else in this country who tries to force a system which is not really acceptable to the people themselves will be a very big mistake. Second, why is the international community bent upon forcing something which is not actually according to their social culture? Women rights, yes, to an extent that is allowed in what Taliban conceive as Islamic State. That is allowed. And that is, and to the extent which Taliban feel what we see on ground as yet. Anything beyond that is something that will not happen immediately. Let that evolve itself. And over a period of time, I'm sure with education, with more exposure to everybody around within the region, outside the region, they will progress to a level which is usually seen to be emancipated level. The third and final before I leave, Afghanistan and Taliban understand, and Pakistan must understand, that these two countries, hotbed of international contest, will continue to be that, because getting out of it will totally diminish American stature as a superpower. Natural phenomena is it happening? The Americans are on their decline. Their power, basically economic power which control the world, is on their decline. They actually use their military muscle to shore it up, and that is what is causing the drain on the economy, and that itself is weakening the economy in turn. But that power on the wane, will it let Afghanistan, Pakistan be, and let decision be, or will it, like it happens, like the history tells me, that while going down, it's not going down so easily. We should brace up for trouble in this region. Thank you very much. Anything more, I think we can talk about in question answer session. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, General Saab. Now, may I request Hussain Shahid Sohrawardi Saab, please? Well, he has not joined us, so I think let's move on. And Dr. Naveed Alahi Saab, could you please take the floor?
Sure, sir. Thank you very much, Shahid sir. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. It's, I would say, just a pleasure for me to listen to the learned speakers who are authority on this subject, because, you know, for last 10-15 days, everybody is saying everything about Afghanistan. They are making even predictions. I think the situation is very fluid in Afghanistan, and it's unfolding gradually. So far, there is, I would say, a lot of uncertainty and insecurity and fear among the public there. Here, one thing is, I would say that with the ouster of Ashraf Ghani government, we think that Taliban have, you know, come into power. At least 20 long years incessant, you know, criticism of Pakistan by Ashraf Ghani and earlier by Hamid Karzai has come to an end. And a new era has started, but I think we should not, you know, jump with joy that as if we have found some lost love. we need to be very pragmatic. I think the best way for us is to construct our new foreign policy on pragmatic foundations and established norms of international relations. And I would say that our national interest mandates a peaceful Afghanistan, as said earlier by the learned speakers, and inclusive and economically viable Afghanistan is in our interest. As far our cooperation with Afghanistan is concerned, I would say that there can be two sets of cooperation. One is unconditional, because we have Afghanistan, we have a unique relationship with them. They have physical contiguity and also religious and cultural affinity with them. So as far food, supply of food, medicines, and even education is concerned, that all out support to new Kabul government, we should expect from them adherence to constitution, inclusive government, safeguard women's rights, and more importantly, and the most importantly, bridle the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. We have, I think these are sort of conditions which are essential for the optics of the international community, that we are not lending all out support without any conditionalities which are required. Now, the rest is the responsibility of Taliban to do it. And we should support them in all aspects after this. And Taliban should realize that daunting challenges are staring in their face, and failure is not an option. I would say that immediate challenge is interim government, but what after that? Would they have to rely on the Constitution of 1964, or they go to Jirgas? That's up to them. But the recognition from the West is very important for them, because now another big challenge for them is their economic viability. As Ebrar Hussain said, that America has frozen $9 billion of the Afghan Central Bank reserves. Similarly, World Bank and IMF have stopped their funding, and they have wrapped up their operations from Afghanistan, and they have shifted to Pakistan now. And another dimension which I want to point out is that Pakistan should beat the Indian narrative also, which is continuing for last many, many years. And lastly, talking about the security implications, as we have seen that there was a dip in the terrorist activities after 15th of August, but then there was a big boom of this, this 3 blast in outside Kabul airport, which caused about 170 deaths, maybe. So I would say that we fear a spillover. We have been asking Taliban to bridle, to control TTP. Initially, I heard there was a report that they have formed a 3-member committee to look into this allegation. But only yesterday, Zabiullah, their spokesperson, said that TTP is Pakistan's issue. This is not our issue. So this also, is an indicator. And only yesterday there was an attack in Bajor from across the border, and our 2 soldiers, they were martyred, and we also fired back and killed 3 terrorists. So this is going to be a big challenge. So the answer is that we keep our guards up. We keep talking to the Taliban, but we keep our guards up, because we can expect any sort of incursion from TTP and likes like Daesh, etc. here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Naveed Elahi Saab. Now, may I invite the participants, if they have any questions, please address your question. But I would request that these questions should be very lucid, to the point. And if there are any comments and observations, we would love to have those comments and observations, for which you can always send us through an email. And my colleague is going to display it on in the messages, the email on which you could share your comments, concerns, and observations. So please, we start with the questions and answer sessions.
with your permission, with the permission of the chair, can I add few comments to what has been already said?
Please go ahead.
As of now, I think Taliban will be able to form a kind of a setup because nobody can afford not to be involved here. And starting with India, a few days back, I think about a week back, when it's happening in a vlog, I made a comment. Everybody was shocked. I said that India may actually lead the kind of relationship establishment with Taliban. And last night I just heard that at the UNSC level, there is some kind of a move for the international community led by India to get to what is so-called the Afghan government as of now. Second issue that we must understand, that Taliban has come in, they're not totally acceptable across the board. There are a lot of the opponents that Taliban have. And those opponents, who are these opponents? They are the people who formed NDS. They're the people who have been working for all. They're the people who have been working for Mossad. And they're the people who have been paid by CIA. And they've been working. Just the other day, I had a prince, and the person who's actually credited with creating Blackwater and many other such organizations, he seems to be in the limelight again with an agreement with Chinese government to help establish and protect One Belt, One Road initiative in this region. That man, and with his organization on ground already existing, and to the extent that he also told Afghans that whoever comes to the airport, we'll take them out. And whoever wants to get out of Afghanistan, even if he gives us a call, we'll pick him up from his house. So what I'm trying to say is that while Taliban may be able to establish a kind of a setup that we think is controlling Afghanistan, below the surface, there are a lot of undercurrents that Taliban will have to face. That is what is causing my anxiety. And I'm also very, very fearful, frankly, talking about one of the friendly countries just across our shore, for which the development of Gwadar as the international port is detrimental to their interest. And I'm talking about UAE and countries. What we see in UAE, we have a very large American presence there, very large Israeli presence, which has happened over the last 20 years or so, a very large Indian presence. And now we also have the dissidents from Kabul settling there. Not that they didn't have the access there, control there. So with this kind of atmosphere within and around Afghanistan, I think security challenges and the challenges for whatever government comes about in Kabul will increase in the coming days. And as one gentleman was pointing out, Pakistan has a challenge, and this challenge is far more serious than what we have faced so far, as I think. I hope I'm wrong again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I recognize Engineer Siddiqur Rahman.
Sir, thank you very much. My question is regarding the economic future of Afghanistan. There is one view that due to three reasons, Afghanistan is going to grow like Vietnam in coming longer term, like 1 or 2 decades. First is Russia, China, Turkey, etc. regional country want to see a stable Afghanistan and going to invest. Secondly, they have a lot of minerals, etc. reserves, and they at present 80% budget is fund dependent budget. It's their need to go for the fast track development. And third is the nationalist, deep-rooted orientation of the people, and probably the fast-paced growth can lead the nation towards a centralized or a stable Afghanistan, getting rid of the warlords and the conflicts. So my question is from the panelists for their comments.
Yes, any of the panelists, please, would you like to respond?
If I may,
Please.
this is something that one actually people want, and this is what we desire. This is what must happen in Afghanistan. But immediate challenges are, how will they establish themselves, pay to the people, and how will they deal with the world, because they cannot undo their own obligation to the world. As I see, when over the years, when I found that about 30 to 35% of the Afghan economy actually is documented. Rest is all what we call the black economy. If a country like Pakistan, which has been endeavoring for a very long time to undo this parallel economic system in the country, I think Afghanistan will take much longer to do that. So that is the immediate issue that the Taliban and the government is facing. The second is that they have resources. Of course, there's no doubt about it. And those resources are humongous. Just the mere transit facilities that they provide, the TAPI gas pipeline, or the trade that we're talking about is $2 to $4 billion. Anybody's guess beyond that, I don't know. With that, they can do the work themselves. The establishing of the institutions which they have been, Afghanistan has been robbed of. There was a deliberate attempt to pull out the technocrats, so to say, from Afghanistan. And Afghanistan, as of now, has this huge vacuum where running the police, running the normal bureaucratic controls, raising an army, which has always been a problem in Afghanistan, let me add here. They always had an army, but the army was always not as unified, not as a one strong body that Pakistan has, like other countries have. They have that problem. So these are immediate challenges the Taliban have to face. If they overcome those, that will again, overcoming those will take time. That will need support. And that is where the recognition will count for them. Thank you.
Prasa, would you like to add something?
Yes, I would tend to agree with what General Saab has said, and would like to add that there is another factor in Afghanistan, that although China and Russia and regional countries would like to have a peaceful Afghanistan, making progress all the time and becoming prosperous, but at the same time, a peaceful Afghanistan doesn't suit the Western powers. For the same reason, because if there is a peaceful Afghanistan, it would help the Chinese economic ambitions, but the West would not like it. So in whatever way possible, they would like to create problems in Afghanistan, whether these are problems and hurdles in economic progress, or these are problems in maintaining peace. We have yet to see how they do it, but I
And Veed Elahi Saab, would you like to
I would just like to add one point. I would second Mr. Ibrahim Hussain's point of view. that the powers would like to create disruption and violence in Afghanistan. But I want to add that this thing they would like to do in Pakistan as well, because the Belt and Road Initiative going through Pakistan will reach the Tajikistan and other Central Asian republics through Wakhan border. So first they would like to create situation here in Pakistan and in Afghanistan as well. I just heard a few days ago that that strip, Wakhan strip, that separates Pakistan with Tajikistan, which is, I think, not more than 9 kilometers wide. Chinese have made a Kacha road there. So that would be the access to the Central Asian republics as well. So Chinese have their own ambitions, economic ambitions, but as Raj has said, definitely the powers, opposing powers would like to undermine it. Thank you.
Thank you. Abrar Saab, do you want to say something additional on that as well?
No, I've already said. Thank you so much.
So Gwadar is the jewel in this whole crown. That's what is go hold everything up. Anybody, a Gwadar is not allowed to progress, not allowed to develop the way it should. The Chinese perceive it to be. The Russians have agreed it to. Whole thing could fall flat, frankly. That is what makes Pakistan a target. That's what makes a very serious challenge for Pakistan.
Sir, I have a question, if you please allow me. I have a question. I'd like to ask the panelists that how do you see the potential collaboration between the US and Afghanistan in terms of their developing relationship now? Thank you. Anyone could answer, please.
Yes, Abrar Saab.
Yes, if I may, I'll try to address this question. Well, right now, the Americans, although they are dealing with the Taliban for evacuation purpose, as they say, they are trying to evacuate their army, all Americans from Afghanistan. And for this very reason, they say they are directly in contact with Taliban. But at the same time, if they think over it, I'll say wisely, and try to maintain their good relations with the new Afghan government, perhaps that will benefit the Americans as well. In the agreement, Doha Agreement of 29 February 2020, the Americans promised that as a result of the intra-Afghan dialogue, whichever next government is there in Kabul, they would try to maintain good relations with that government and would try to help them. So that promise is already there. But right now, President Joe Biden seems to be under pressure from his own people, from his own government, and they are all blaming him for a hurried, disorganized withdrawal from Afghanistan, which resulted in the sudden fall of Kabul to Taliban. Although, as I said before as well, this was the writing on the wall. This was to happen sooner or later. And in fact, it was Trump who decided to withdraw from Afghanistan. And Biden, in fact, delayed this departure, this exit from Afghanistan for a few months. And then the man who is really responsible for this sudden fall is Ashraf Ghani, who not only refused to have an interim government, who not only refused to properly talk to the Taliban, but also fled at the moment. I mean, even before the departure, before the exit of the American forces, he fled Kabul, and Kabul had to fall even long before 31st of August. So, well, I think if Americans, I mean, they may not recognize the new government immediately, but in the long run, they will think over it that if they leave Afghanistan, if they leave the Kabul government to the region, that means they are fulfilling the economic ambitions of China, which they would never like. So by stopping the funds for Kabul government, by asking IMF and World Bank and other financial institutions not to help Afghanistan, I think they are paving a way for Russia and China to come to Kabul and help them out. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The next is Dr. Suleiman Lodi. Please.
Yeah, I just have one question, a short question. Could the panel give us some idea of the strategic directions that Pakistan should follow, keeping in view the fluidness that we have in the region? Thank you.
General Saab, would you like to please chip in?
Ji. Pakistan actually has very limited choices, so to speak. Of course, Pakistan foremost responsibility is to protect and allow a security situation within the country which allows us to develop. And second, of course, as all panelists seem to agree, that Afghanistan, which I always considered as a geographical entity, which is one Afghanistan and Pakistan, has to be peaceful for Pakistan to go forward. And then, of course, Gwadar is what hurts many in the region. Having said that, Pakistan just can't afford to have adversarial relationship with the international powers like United States and everybody else. And Pakistan doesn't want it, it's not doing that. But at the same time, Pakistan's economic and strategic future is almost committed to what is now emerging as China-led economic system in the world. China-led the power structure which is likely to emerge in the world. So that way Pakistan is committed itself. And luckily, Russia and China behind the scenes over the years have developed very strong relationship between the two. So therefore, there is very little that hurts Pakistan in this region. Iran also has come about, and the Iran also understands that working with Pakistan and in collaboration with Pakistan through Afghanistan and other regions is helpful to Iran also. And quite a few years back, when there was a talk of Chabahar port as an alternative to Gwadar, it could never be alternative to Gwadar because Gwadar's potential and Gwadar's quality, whatever, actually go for a deep sea port required for this kind of trade that we think is going to happen. Gwadar is only fit. But Chabahar as a sister port to Gwadar, about 80 kilometers separating the two, rail and road link, which isn't much for the power for China, even Russia, for Iran itself too, or Pakistan to tell about. So what I see is Pakistan already committed to a direction. And for foreseeable future, I think the countries in the region, Iran, Uzbekistan, even Tajikistan seems to have agreed. Turkmenistan, obviously, because they're also in a way landlocked. And what we normally forget is the Caspian Sea resources, which are huge, honestly, mother. When I don't remember the exact figures, but when comparing, just to get the idea of what it is far more than Saudi Arabian hydrocarbon reserves. And that is there is an agreement which has been worked out through the sagacity of the Russian government led by Putin, the countries around it, they have come to an agreement, and that is exploitable when Afghanistan becomes peaceful and the countries, the region, are working together. So the potential is huge. Pakistan is already committed. Very little that Pakistan can do about it. But at the same time, Pakistan just can't be adversary to the American-led West.
Can I add one point?
Yes, please.
I think it is a pertinent question by Dr. Lodi and adequately answered by General Ghulam Mustafa. But one point I want to add is that we have a propensity, to resort to tactical moves instead of going for a strategic vision. As I said, that we don't have to jump in joy that again our, Taliban are back and it would be favorable to us. We need to have a long-lasting strategic relationship with the countries, a country-to-country relationship instead of, supporting one at the cost of other. What happened in case of India? They have invested a lot of money during last 20 years in Afghanistan, but it was for one party and almost against one other party. So they have to, run away from there, despite all this investment. Same is the case for India. Look at China. China has invested in Pakistan, and this is the third government. They have a sustainability in their, investment here and the relationship. So we should have a deliberate, planned, and sustained plan for the country, and not to favor one at the cost of other. Thank you.
Very well said, sir.
Abrar sir, please.
Sir, I'll just add to what Mr. Naveed Elahi has just said, that in Afghanistan, instead of supporting just one government, we should support people of Afghanistan. And I think we have been trying to do that, because all the previous projects that Pakistan did in Afghanistan, the economic assistance that we extended to Afghanistan was not directly given in the form of money to Afghan government. What we did was we built hospitals there, 3 big hospitals. We built faculties in many universities. For example, we built engineering faculty in Mazar Sharif, Balkh University. We built faculty of arts in Kabul University. We did faculty of science in Nangarhar University. And then we built a number of roads. The longest one from Torkham to Jalalabad, 75 kilometers. And then we offered scholarships to Afghan students. Thousands of them have been studying there. And you would be pleased to know that right now there are about 40 to 50,000 Afghan graduates who have graduated from Pakistani universities. So it's a huge number.
Yes.
But I think this is the right way to do it. And we will hopefully continue to do so. Compared to it, what India was doing is that it was sending weapons to the Ashraf Ghani government to fight Taliban. It was openly speaking against Taliban. It was asking for not negotiating with Taliban because they were terrorists, and India had been doing it openly for a few years until it realized that it's the writing on the wall, and they started keeping quiet. So I think we are already helping Afghan people and not Afghan governments. And hopefully we will continue to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Asif, please. Mr. Asif, please.
जी sir, can you hear me, sir?
Ji, please.
Achha, sir, I have some comment to make and then ask a question from the panel. We know that economic activity is actually linked with the peace in the region. So once we talk about having connections with the Central Asian states and at the same time having relations with Iran, there need to be a peace in Afghanistan. We require a stable government in Afghanistan. Now coming to, sir, the question, Dr. Naveed also mentioned regarding presence of TTP, active presence in Afghanistan, and the latest terrorist activity conducted by Daesh. Now, we know there are the complex relationship of TTA, Tehreek-e-Taliban Afghanistan, and Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. But at the same time, there is a growing nexus between BLA and TTP itself. And BLA has camps not only in Afghanistan, but also in Iran. And once we talk about having relationships on mutual benefit between Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, so how do you talk to these countries having these terrorist camps there, and how do you intend that we will progress or make a better relationship with them with respect to generation of economic activity? Number one, sir. And number two, sir, India has a major Air Force base in Tajikistan. And how do you see that angle growing up once there's a tussle going on between Ahmad Shah Massoud's son and the Islamic Emirate Afghanistan government there? That's it, sir.
Thank you. General Saab, would you please respond to very pertinent questions?
So this is a very well thought out question. At the highest level of strategic game plan that seems to be emerging is Iran and China have agreed to over $450 billion worth of trade agreement between the two. China has already linked itself through some Asian republics to Iran, and there have been a number of trains which have been moving from China to Iran and way back. The idea is to help Iran get out of the kind of isolation that America was forcing it to. It is in Iran's interest not to have conflicts in the region. And therefore, you see that it played a very positive role when it came to Afghanistan's settlement. And that is what is very encouraging for Pakistan. The BLA, etc., of course, they had a problem. But does it suit Afghanistan to let these people operate from their base, from their homeland, work against Pakistan? No. It doesn't suit Taliban, it doesn't suit Afghanistan. It did suit the powers to be. That is what I've been pointing out time and again, that while America may have left the region, optics may seem to be so, but as a power it doesn't and won't and just can't afford to leave the region. That is where we need to have an understanding. That is where the sagacity and that is where the understanding of Taliban, how to run the country, will actually help them. Pakistan is a problem. So at the highest level, there seems to be understanding. At this level that I'm talking about, there is a problem that Pakistan has. And that problem is not because of Taliban. That problem is because despite Taliban, we had this problem. And now that Taliban end, we're still having this problem because it is sponsored and funded and managed and done from somewhere else. Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan does not comprise those Afghans which have the affiliation with Taliban or Taliban of Afghanistan. That itself has no strong base from where to operate against Pakistan. It had the support from India, it had support from Mossad, it continues to enjoy some support from Americans because otherwise it won't have been possible. It is ironic that while America continues to blame Pakistan, but while Pakistan was trying to clear its own territory of terrorists, Americans, rather than helping Pakistan, actually allowed them to escape over the water. Just an example, North Waziristan operation. Were Pakistan fully ready to go into and clear North Waziristan, Pakistan also wanted Americans to come and deploy themselves across the international border on the other side so that the terrorists who are actually being hounded out of this Afghanistan don't cross over. America never did that. Instead, they allowed an open border there. They allowed the formation of what you call Daesh. It didn't exist prior to 2014. Nobody knew what is Daesh. But now suddenly you find that after 2014, this has come out. Taliban have actually been fighting. In one of the battles the Taliban were fighting at that point in time with the Afghan National Forces. On one side, while they're fighting the Afghan National Forces, they're also fighting Daesh on the other side. They suffered casualties, Afghanistan Taliban, but they did overcome that. And Americans were supporting those so-called Daesh soldiers who are fighting Taliban on one side. So Taliban have a problem, and by extension, Pakistan also has a problem that way. This is at the lower level, that at the mid-strategic level, that Pakistan and Afghanistan, and I may add Iran also have to address. And there's something which none of the other countries in the region actually encourage. Actually, they actually would discourage this. These are the fears the Chinese have, these are the fears the Russians have, these are the fears the Uzbeks have. So because of that, I think this will be able to manage and control it, although the danger remains. But Panjshir, let me add here, the Badakhshan is under Taliban control. That was the last, actually the real base. Panjshir itself is a long, narrow valley, 25 kilometers long. It has been blocked from the north. There's no support which is possible to the Panjshiris. And Taliban already have entered the Panjshir Valley. And Amit Shah Masood's two brothers who are in Pakistan, they actually are talking about developing a strategic relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Amit Shah Masood's son, Sanders graduate, doesn't enjoy the kind of stature or the support which his father had. And therefore, they have not been fighting for the last 25 years. They actually were enjoying comparatively peaceful atmosphere in Panjshir Valley. And I don't think so it's going to last very long. Taliban will be able to deal with them. They're talking to them. And Panjshiri elders already are in Kabul talking to Taliban to help them out and get them a proper share in the government. So I think this is not the problem. The main issue is what I'm referred to time and again. Maybe I'm fixated, but that's how I look at it. Thank you.
I would just like to, with your permission, add a point about TTP. You know, Tehreek-e-Taliban, Pakistan, recently, about I think a month ago, there was an interview on CNN by the chief of TTP, who openly threatened that Pakistan, we are fighting against Pakistan and the security forces of Pakistan, and we would liberate the tribal areas. So they have made their intention very clear. So after, you know, this military operations, many of them, they sneaked into Afghanistan and they have been living in Kunar and Nuristan areas. And from there, they have been striking back. And for last 1 year, they have become very active. They have changed their modus operandi. Instead of massive suicide bombing, they have resorted to target killing of policemen and forces and the use of IDs. Secondly, you see, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Afghanistan, the Afghani Taliban, they have been quite soft with TTP. I remember there was a many years ago when Mullah Omar was alive and Baitullah Masood, the founder chief of TTP, was alive. He gave and the TTP terrorism was at the peak. So he just gave an advisory note. Mullah Omar gave an advisory note that please don't do this against Pakistan. Even now, when I see these statements from the Taliban spokesperson and others, so they don't seem to be very serious about that. So we don't mind about that. The way out is that we should have a robust counter-terrorism strategy, because enemies keep, you know, coming to you. We should be ready for that. We can't blame anybody, India or America or the foreign hand. We should be ready to face these, you know, terrorists. And this, you know, challenge is staring in our face. And for last year, it's continuing. And after 15th August, it has not petered out. It has not diminished. I quoted just only a day ago, there was an attack from across the border. So let's hope that once the Taliban are properly in saddle, they would try to control TTP, but our doubts should be there. Thank you.
Ibrahim Saab.
Ji, I'll just give a brief clarification about a statement by TTP spokesperson, which has been quoted by many in Pakistan, where he is quoted to have said that it's a problem between TTP and Pakistan and they should resolve it themselves. Well, in fact, the Taliban spokespersons have been saying it time and again that they will not allow the Afghan soil to be used against Pakistan, and they will not allow TTP to use Afghan soil for activities against Pakistan. But this time, in this interview, the question was framed in such a way which asked the spokesperson that, will you persuade the TTP not to fight against Pakistan? And the response was that it's something between Pakistan and TTP, which means to persuade, to convince TTP is not their job. What their job is to stop TTP from using Afghan soil against Pakistan, which is very clear. So what my view is that Taliban may or may not hand over the TTP people to Pakistan, but they will at least not allow them to use Afghan soil against Pakistan. Thank you.
I can ask a question.
Ms. Laiba Ahmed.
Dr. Zaman Nazi.
Thank you, sir.
I can ask a question.
Thank you, sir. Assalamu alaikum. I have two questions for the panel. My first question is, what would the Taliban attitude be towards one of the key security concerns of Pakistan, the Durand Line? And my second question is, I was wondering what the panelist speculations would be about who might lend recognition to Taliban. The Russians have hinted at recognizing Taliban, but what about the rest of the regional actors like Pakistan, Iran, China, Turkey? Will this recognition be in collaboration or would it be individually, in your opinions?
Will you, Ms. Laiba, repeat the question, because I think the speed was very fast. I couldn't get analyst, I believe. If you could repeat your question with...
Yes, sir. Sorry, I'll repeat my questions. So I have two questions. My first question is, what would the Taliban attitude be towards one of the key security concerns of Pakistan, the Durand Line? And my second question, I'm wondering what the panelist speculations would be about who might lend recognition to Taliban. For example, the Russians have hinted that they might recognize Taliban, but what about the rest of the regional actors, for example, Pakistan, Iran, China, and Turkey? Additionally, would this recognition from these actors be in collaboration or would it be individually, in your opinions? Thank you.
Panelists, please, Dr. Ibrar Saab.
About Durand Line issue. Well, my own view is that Durand Line issue should not be raised by Pakistan time and again. For us, it's a settled issue. For us, it's an international border, and we should not keep on raising it. Secondly, in Afghanistan, it's raised for domestic political reasons. And even they know that this is a settled issue. You know, de facto as well, de jure. De facto, because they all come to the border, they show their passports, they show their visas, and then they cross the border. If they're stopped by the Pakistan security people, they can't object to it. They can't say that this is not the border, we don't accept it. So practically, for all practical purposes, for trade, for immigration, for other crossings, it is realized as a de facto border. And de jure also, because Afghanistan never went to any international forum to say that they don't accept Durand Line as international border. Had they any argument against us, they would have done so long ago. But they know that they don't have any argument to support their claim. They know we are the successor state. They know we occupy this land, and they know that the 1893 Durand Line Agreement was indefinite, and then it was endorsed by the Afghans so many times in early 20th century. So they all know it. But for domestic reasons, sometimes they raise this issue in order to gain politically within Afghanistan. So far as Taliban are concerned, I don't think they will ever raise this issue for domestic politics, and Pakistan should also not raise it, because if we raise it with the Taliban, we will be creating a domestic problem for them. First, let them consolidate the government in Afghanistan, and after that, if there is a time which is mature for any recognition announcement from their side, then okay, we can think over it, but not immediately. I mean, now even their government has not been formed, so it would be too early to raise such issues or to talk about such issues. Secondly, about the recognition of the new government. Well, as we have been watching the reaction of the world, many countries have asked them to have a negotiated settlement, have an inclusive, a broad-based government, and only then they would recognize it. But since the whole region is watching their efforts, and if the other countries, I mean, China has already indicated that they would like to work with them. Iran has also in so many words indicated it. Russia has indicated it. So the regional countries seem to be willing to recognize the new government whenever it is formed. But as for Pakistan, I think Pakistan is already in consultation with these governments, with regional countries, and well, as many analysts are of the view that Pakistan should not be the only country to recognize the new government. We should be doing it in consultation with the other regional governments, but at the same time, it's very difficult to say right now that whether all of them would be making a collective announcement or say one by one, say one day, second day, third day, like this. We have to wait and see. Thank you.
Sir, I have one question, if I'm allowed to ask.
Going to be, I'm afraid we have very little time. A last question.
So please unmute yourself. So unmute yourself first.
Yes, Dr. Numan, and this is going to be our last question because we are running already short of time. So please be brief. Thank you.
I'll be very brief. I'm Dr. Numan Majid, Dean Social Sciences from Lahore Garrison University. My question is from General Ghulam Mustafa. There is a narrative which is currently building up, and a former National Security Advisor, John Bolton of USA, he has also recently blamed Pakistan and has held Pakistan as directly responsible for Taliban's return to the power. So, as a defense strategist, what do you recommend to the Islamabad government, how they can cope up with this narrative which is being built up in collaboration with India and Israel? Because this narrative, this school of thought can be very dangerous for building up foreign relations with USA, or they can be very damaging to the relations which whatever so-called we have with them.
Like I said earlier, one, Pakistan just can't afford not to have a working relationship, at least with the US-led Western world. for a number of different reasons. Number two, the Western world itself just cannot afford not to have Pakistan, at least to the extent they can talk to them, they can get through to Pakistan, to Afghanistan and such nation republics. So Pakistan has an advantage here. But like you said, this narrative is not new. And this narrative was in place already. This just now that you talk of the neocons of United States of America, the conservatives, they actually want the Americans to punish Pakistan for it. Can America do that? What would be the result if America does that immediately? That is not likely to happen. But in the long run, yes, Pakistan has a problem, like I said earlier, that American troops might have left Afghanistan. America has not. And Americans like Dr. Shahid Najam and Brar Sahab and Naveed Sahab also pointed out that Pakistan has to be on guard. And Pakistan, as we have already committed ourselves, I think very, very strongly to East working relationship with China and Russia and Iran also seeing the light of the day to quite an extent. I think Pakistan is at a fairly comfortable place, but not where we can be very, very easy and let go of our security. No, we can't. America will come back and come back very strongly. And I'm afraid it may be sounding out of place right now, but UAE seems to be the point from where the base of operation could be, from where they'll be working against out of this Pakistan. Because Gwadar, like I said earlier, is something that everybody wants to control and doesn't suit anybody else other than Pakistan, frankly. So it's anybody's guess what will happen in the future. But I think with Gwadar, the Chinese coming in, the sea routes to Gwadar, the Iranians seeing the light of the day, Pakistan up to it, already understanding, Pakistan has a very clear understanding of the issues involved in Islamabad. And therefore, I think we are comfortably placed at this point in time. But like all panelists have said, we have to stay on guard, actually raise or improve our own security and our own working.
Brar Sahab, you have been Pakistan's ambassador to Afghanistan at very, very critical junctures. Would you like to share any special insights coming out of your experience in Afghanistan? And I know that you have very comprehensively covered the various aspects. But anything additional that you would like to add based on your personal experience of working within Iran, with especially Ashraf Ghani's government?
Well, thank you so much. I have been in Afghanistan for 2 stints. First one was as Consul General Kandahar during Taliban's first government, when Mullah Omar was there and Kandahar was de facto capital. And secondly, in Kabul as ambassador during President Karzai and then President Ashraf Ghani's time. Well, I'll just want to add one thing, that Afghanistan has a typical tribal culture, and they have their own traditions, their own norms, their own values. And we, while supporting people of Afghanistan, should not try to interfere in their cultural and traditional and whatever you will call it, system. Because when we do it, like the West did it for the last 20 years, they tried to change the culture and values and of Afghanistan, and they failed. Because if you do so, you are considered as an enemy and not as a friend. You can support them financially, you can support them socially, you can support them to improve their situation, but you are not supposed to try and change their culture. So this, we should be very mindful, very careful while supporting whatever new government is there. Thank you.
General Saab, would you like to add before I just wind up the discussion? Will you please unmute your...
Is it fine or not? 2010, I was invited to a dinner in consulate Lahore. And this was on behest of one Colonel David Smith, who had done staff post with me. Well, the dinners, they just want to get my assessment of how Afghanistan is likely to come out. Not that I'm very proud of what I said, but like Mr. Brad was saying, have some understanding of how Afghans work. And I told him that whatever you're trying will fail, because you can't change the social fabric of Afghans so quickly and change their cultural values so quickly to suit what you want in the West. You're going to fail. Militarily, of course, not only me, but General Musharraf, starting with General Musharraf, almost everybody told Americans they're going to fail. Talk to Taliban before you can get into trouble. But they have. That's the way they think. But there is what's also going to be a very serious problem for the Americans, because having seemed to be losing militarily is not what that country can tolerate. Thank you very much, sir.
Dr. Naveed Saab, if you are still with us, would you like to supplement remarks that you have already made?
I would just like to second what Ambassador Abrar Hussain had said, that we should not interfere in their internal affairs. I had written in my book, which was published about 3 years ago, that we should not interfere in their political affairs, basically, because they don't like it. As the Prime Minister also said, which should not have been said publicly, about the xenophobia or something like that, but they don't like other people to interfere. Secondly, I think the important thing is to address the perceptions which are developed there. Perceptions should be clear that we are not interfering, we are just their good neighbors and we just want to help them out. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wish to really thank all of our distinguished panelists for their very enlightening and comprehensive insights which they have shared with us on a subject which is rapidly evolving and about a country which for decades and decades has been radicalized, has been subjected to wars, violence, interventions all along. Now, there are a few takeaways that we have from this session. The very first, which I would like to share with you, is that we ought to have, from Pakistan's point of view, a strategic orientation towards developing our relationship with Afghanistan and in conjunction with our allies, partners, especially those who are in the immediate neighborhood, that we should desist from achieving any technical gains which subsequently are likely to boomerang. The second thing is that while all of us are talking about democracy, inclusive government, that we should not lose sight of the millennia-old cultural, traditional settings which are very well entrenched in the Afghan society. You cannot impose democracy from above. So while we would facilitate, encourage, let the Afghanis, based on the specific cultural context and the power dynamics, decide as to how to come up with a government which is more representative. And as General Saab said, let the time over the years with education, with enlightenment, with the interaction with the rest of the world, with exposure with the rest of the world, that they will able to evolve and then reform and then talk about, in the traditional classical sense, the constitutional fundamental rights which ought to be secured and safeguarded for the citizens. I'm not belittling the significance of these rights which ought to be there. But I think we need to define these rights based on the cultural specific context of Afghanistan. The third thing is that no matter United States has suddenly withdrawn, that does not mean that it will abandon the area. The region has its own geostrategic advantage and its own geostrategic significance, which the West at this point in time may sound having withdrawn, will never ever abandon. So this region, Afghanistan, together with Pakistan, we have to somehow negotiate, recognize, and we somehow need to realize that this area is going to be a hotbed for all kinds of intervention given the political economic order which we have in this world now and which is evolving. Look at the advantages which a peaceful Afghanistan would offer to Pakistan and to China and to the entire countries in the region. The transit trade, the access to the energy resource area, and in the international politics, no country would like not to have a say in the affairs and in the management of this area. The third thing is that there are three important things which have emerged. One is that the peace and security, development, that they have to come up in the wake of the enormity of the economic challenges, of education, of health, of infrastructure, of poverty. These challenges have to be addressed either through humanitarian aid or through some kind of a consortium intervention orchestrated by the UN system. And Pakistan needs to associate itself in that effort of the economic reconstruction of Afghanistan. Now, while the de jure recognition may come at a later stage, depending upon how the situation evolves, de facto, there are many countries which are already engaging, and Pakistan is already engaging with the Taliban. And let's hope that this engagement will concretize into a better and more secure, more prosper Afghanistan, which will not only be beneficial for the country to leave a better Afghanistan for the posterity, but also contribute to the development of the region. So these are some of the issues that I think were debated upon. And I once again thank you very much, the panelists, for their very enlightening comments. And we hope and continue to engage ourselves, continue to promote a dialogue, a discussion, and parleys, formally, informally, with the view to ensuring that Pakistan's interests are safeguarded, and at the same time, the people of Afghanistan who have very strong affiliation with Pakistan both culturally and ethnically. They also come out of this shackles of poverty and shackles of war, which have been imposed upon them for decades and decades. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. So look, with these words, I think let's conclude this session, and till next time, hopefully all of you, we wish you all very safe and full of SOPs life, given the emergence of the fourth wave of COVID-19. Thank you indeed.